and musician who lives in Washington with his wife, Katie. Jesse spent time in 3 different institutions of higher learning, including Modesto Junior College and Azusa Pacific University. He graduated from CSU Stanislaus with a BA in Organizational Communication and from Santa Clara University with a master's in Counseling Psychology. Jesse's first book is called The Church of Facebook, How the Hyper-Connected Are Redefining Community. It's been called a witty and well-researched look at how online social networking, especially Facebook, is revolutionizing culture and impacting human relationships. In other news, Jesse got a black belt in karate when he was 14. He was the lead singer of a band for 3 years called Third Floor Thursday, which I heard in college. That's how I know him. And he spent 4 summers at Mount Hermon Christian Conference Center in Santa Cruz, California, as a counselor, program director, band leader, and conference center MC. He had a mullet in high school, but not today. Let's welcome Jesse Rice.
Oh my. That's what you get with the internet. You can find out all kinds of interesting information about people and use it against them. Good morning. Aaron and Andrew, thank you for, they've been rehearsing that since 6:30 this morning, moving the stool, and you guys nailed it. Nailed it. It is so good to be here with you this morning. I love this place, not just because I'm now living in Seattle-ish, where it's like no degrees and wet, but also because I used to come here in high school for summer camps. And that was a very significant time for me where God did a lot of special work. Actually, the last time I was here, though, I was in college, and I was visiting some college friends, and they told me they were going to hook me up with some place to stay. So I thought, sweet, I'll just bring my sleeping bag. And came down and then got down here and found out they didn't have a place for me. So feeling much like the Virgin Mary herself, I took my sleeping bag and I hiked up one of your trails here, like kind of deep into the woods, and just laid it out there on the trail and tried to go to sleep. And I was like, is that a squirrel? Is that a cougar that's going to eat my face? What is that? And everything was pretty quiet for a couple hours until finally I heard these voices and footsteps coming toward me. They stopped about 30 feet from me, and there was this quiet conversation going on that morphed into quiet kissing noises. And I had ended up in somebody's makeout spot. So I just think of Westmont with a lot of affection and passion, just a lot of love. There's a lot of love in this room. And that's back when sinners went to Westmont, so I know that's none of you guys. You're like, dude, that's my spot. I got to move that spot. Well, I'm so excited to be with you this morning, especially talking about this strange subject. That life is permanently different because of things like Facebook. It's everywhere, it's all the time, we're always on, we're always tethered to our technology in some format, or we're thinking about who we're connecting with that way. And I mean, it's everywhere. And we even have the Hollywood movie about it, which you guys are going to see later this week, which is a fantastic movie, the best part of which is Justin Timberlake, of course. Oh, some JT fans. Yeah. A lot of mainly women are celebrating with me, that one. But I'm like, bro, why you got to do acting too? Like, you brought sexy back. What more do you want? That's plenty. I seriously, don't stop showing off. My wife, actually, Katie, we've been married for 5 years, and she used to work at Facebook when we lived in Palo Alto. And very strange experience, because it was this really high-paying job that was fantastic. She worked from home, and then one day she got an email, computer-generated email, that she had been replaced by artificial intelligence, and that was the end of that job. Wow, you guys are compassionate. Thank you. I thought it was going to be funny. You're like, oh, how's she doing? Is she okay? You guys can send her a Facebook message and encourage her. And then I wrote a book about it. And it was such an interesting thing to be writing a book about it, because when I started, there's about 100 million people. And when I finished, like 6 months later, there's about 250 million people. Now, of course, there's about 600 million people. And so it's just this amazing phenomenon that is revolutionizing, of course, the way that we communicate and the way that we think of ourselves and think of relationships. And it's such a timely and hot topic, and it's exciting. But really, my book is really about community. How do we do life together well, especially considering the fact that so much of our relationships now are kind of in a disembodied form. And I want to tell you just right off the bat that I have a few biases about community and the internet. Number one, I don't think that on or off are our only options. I think that if you decide, I'm not going to, I don't want any of that, that's fine and that's valid. At the same time, I feel like God calls us to engage culture, right where culture is at. And so I want to applaud you and encourage you where you are engaging in those ways. Don't feel bad if you're not, because some of you might genuinely feel called to do that. I applaud that as well. But I would say the default should be to be on, to be engaged in that kind of setting. I also don't make the distinction between real community and virtual community. I think that's a false dichotomy. I think that there is community, and we experience it in all kinds of different ways. We experience it face-to-face over coffee. We experience it through little IM messages back and forth to each other, through texting, all that kind of thing. We know that, of course, there are different depths and levels of experience in those different formats of community. But nevertheless, there's community, and there are a variety of different ways we experience it. I also believe that we, as followers of Jesus, have a very, very unique opportunity during this very unique season in history to lead the conversation in this area. This thing has just swept everybody by storm. Social networking, social media, it's saturated our lives. Cell phones have taken over everything that we do. We have this unique opportunity to speak into this because ideally, no one knows more about community than the church. Because we have this God who lives in community, who has created us for community, who invites us and empowers us for community. Which is why all the more I feel that we are called to engage and to do this well, to bring life into our online connectivity. I just spat at you, Andrew. Did you see that? Sorry, bro. That's intimacy, authenticity, right there. I'm being very open with you guys. Just kidding, it's spit. But how do we do that? How do we inject life into our connectivity? How do we do that? Well, I want to use a story from the Bible. Wow, shocker. To illustrate kind of what I think of as 3 ways we can really think about engaging with our culture, engaging with one another, bringing life into our community, both online, offline, however you experience it. So I want to use this story. This story is one that is pretty familiar to most of you, I imagine. It comes from John chapter 4. John is a book of the Bible. The Bible is a book written a long time ago. And it is typically known as the woman at the well. Jesus meeting the woman at the well. It kind of starts out like this. Now Jesus, had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into town to buy food. It's interesting that Jesus, a Jewish rabbi man, goes through Samaria. Most Jews at that time, self-respecting Jews, would go around Samaria. Samaritans were deemed unclean, unworthy. They would add up to a day of travel just to go around, avoid this place, even though it was sort of a hub on this major pathway between a couple of cities. But Jesus intends to go right through the heart of this, right where the action is. He intends to go there. Secondly, Jesus seems to step outside of these social norms because, again, he's a dude, and dudes did not talk to the dudettes at that time. Men did not typically associate with women in public. Any conversation was usually in private, and then only between maybe spouses or siblings or that kind of thing. But here is Jesus, a man, a Jewish rabbi, initiating a conversation with a woman right in the middle of where people could see him. Jesus intentionally goes in, kind of breaks these questionable social things in order to meet with this woman. And third, I believe that Jesus was very intentional in the way that he initiates this conversation with this woman. He's the one who starts it. She's kind of coming out to draw water, and he's the one who initiates the conversation. Now, of course, this is not just any woman, right? This woman has a reputation. She's kind of like Lindsay Lohan, Kim Kardashian, and the entire cast of Jersey Shore combined. All right? She is known in her town as one who kind of gets around. She's had multiple husbands. The guy she's with now is not her husband, on and on. She is known for the shameful things she has done. And so she comes to the well at noon in the heat of day because nobody's going to be out there. They come in the morning, they come in the evening when it's cooler. Not in the middle of the day, but that's when she's there because she is ashamed. She knows her reputation. And she's approaching and she sees this man and she thinks, oh, no. And Jesus initiates this conversation, which makes me think this first key that's going to help us engage our culture, engage our connectivity, engage community is intentionality. Intentionality. We have to make a choice to be intentional. We all have so many people in our social networks. We have so many connections, so many opportunities that we're going to have to be very thoughtful and intentional about who we connect to, how we connect to, what we say, what we don't say. What does intentionality mean? Well, it just means on-purpose living. It just means making lots of little choices every day based on some goal, based on some value, based on who we think we are, who we think God is, how we think of others. Intentionality means aiming for a target, intent on hitting the bullseye. So when you think about your online connectivity, when you think about your experience of community, what are you aiming for? Is it entertainment? I am fairly entertained by my friends on Facebook. They're kind of like my new favorite reality show. You know, kind of just watching what different people are up to, see what trips are going on, living vicariously through their experiences. Is it notoriety? Is it like growing that Facebook number of friends into the ridiculous? You know? And kind of establishing a presence for yourself in that space? Is it romance? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Because you know when you meet that person, the first thing you do is you go check out, see if they're online, on Facebook. You see if there's any flattering pictures of them. Oh, that's interesting. They've been there too. Oh, that's cool. They have the same interests as I do. Oh, wow, they're big Star Wars fans. This is amazing. I think this is the one. All these things, none of those things are bad, but what are you kind of aiming at in that stuff? What are you aiming at? We're going to have to turn toward each other very intentionally. We have finite amount of time, finite amount of energy. And so one suggestion might be pick 2 or 3 of your Facebook friends and just focus on them for a month. Let the rest of it be noise. Kind of keep exchanging messages, words of encouragement. How you doing? What's going on? Because otherwise there's so much noise that all we can do is just sort of react. We just react to the shiny, glittery stuff, whatever is kind of most clever, most interesting in the moment. How are you being intentional? Because when we're not being intentional, we get this kind of relational consumerism. Relational consumerism. We're like, I'll have some of that, and I'll take one of those, and oh, I don't have that friend, and oh, you know that person, and sort of this picking what I want, picking what fits. We know that the reality is human relationships take time, and they take energy, they're inconvenient, they're messy. Facebook can help this. Facebook can make it more challenging. But in order to intentionally kind of develop intimacy, to grow that community, to inject life into community, we're going to have to rearrange our schedules. We're going to have to make time for one another. That can be sometimes easier in college than it is post-college. It's still hard in college. Rearrange our priorities. Since it takes energy, we're going to have to move some things, you know? There's a reason why maybe is the number one thing that you click on an Evite. Maybe. Depends on who's going to be there. Depends on how I'm feeling. Is that going to be a bad hair day? I don't want to go. Stuff like that. I think the biggest thing we're going to have to do is learn to be present with one another. I believe especially now, the biggest gift we could give to one another is the gift of our full attention. I am here with you, body, mind, and soul. We have a God who came in the flesh. And so when we are in the flesh with one another, when we are embodied, when we are with one another, there is great power there for healing, for new life. And you know that experience of like you're trying to share something deep and your buddy's texting while you're doing that? Yeah, my girlfriend broke up with me, and is that right? And then my dog got run over. Oh, that's too bad. And then you've got voicemail. You've got a way to turn it off. There's a space for intentionally just being present with one another, listening. But there's another key here. The first is intentionality. The second is a little bit further on in this portion of Scripture. Jesus is talking to this woman again. The conversation continues. And he starts offering her this water that is going to just save her life. It's going to change her life. And she says, I want it. Give me. And he says, sweet, go call your husband and come back. Uh-oh. Okay, well, I have no husband, she replied. I love this, what Jesus says. Well, you are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have said is quite true. I don't think he was as snarky as that, but what I see here is this second key, which I think is authenticity. Authenticity. I think Jesus is not saying these things to her in order to shame her. He's saying these things to her because he wants to relate to her just as she is, not as she should be. Authenticity. Authenticity is simply congruence with our true self. Congruence with that really real you that God has made you to be. Not the baggage, not the pain, not all the stuff. It's the real you, that core, essential being. That's authenticity. And it's hard because we all have these masks. We're all insecure to some extent. And we build these defenses that serve as masks, and it's hard to get behind those. And it's even tougher because in a space like Facebook or any kind of social media, that is sort of amped up. Doesn't mean it's bad, but it's just amped up. And we have to be aware of that because we can sort of pick just the right photo that covers up, this is it right here. Which is a bummer because I'm using proactive and I don't understand. Because anything that's good enough for Jessica Simpson is good enough for me. So, but we all have these masks. For me, growing up, for some reason I got in my head that being the good boy, being a perfectionist was my mask. And I know in a room like this, at a high-functioning, high-performance college, there's a lot of perfectionists in this room. Yeah, I'm going to get it right. I'm going to do it better than everybody else. This sort of led me to, when I was in 6th grade, breakdancing was all the rage. Dude, how old are you? Breakdancing was huge, and in my little Pharisee mind, I would go around the playground. If I found friends that were breakdancing, I would go to them and I would say to them in no uncertain terms that if they kept breakdancing, they were going to go to hell. "11 years old. That's why I've done a lot of therapy. But it started before that because in kindergarten, I had a friend named Melvin Miller. Yes, Melvin. And Melvin and I would go around the playground. And do you know the band KISS, right? They're still alive somehow, miraculously. KISS. I was told at that time that stood for Knights in Satan's Service. Oh, scandal. Scandal. I would go around in kindergarten with my friend Melvin Miller. We would ask kids, do you like KISS? If they said yes, we said, oh, well, you're going to hell. 5 years old. My role, my identity was get it right, be the good boy, be better than everybody else. It's ridiculous, but we've all got some version of that is pretty much equally ridiculous. We've got these masks. We're trying to get behind these masks, but how do we do that so that we can breathe life into our communities, into our connectivity? I just want to suggest a couple of different ways. First of all, we got to know ourselves. I love college and I love speaking to college students because this is such a unique and powerful time where your identity is being shaped, you're figuring stuff out, things are just happening that are clicking, and it's awesome. And figuring out who you are is going to be one of the greatest gifts that you can give others. When I was just about to turn 30 years old, and there's something about those big birthdays that started to make you think stuff, like, wow, I'm going to be 21. I'm going to be 25, a quarter century, dear heavens. I'm going to be 30, and whatever comes after 30. Something about those birthdays that make you think. And I was thinking about this stuff, and I was thinking about the pain that had sort of backed up in my life. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and he gave me this great line that I would like to give you as a gift this morning because it changed my life. His line to me was, because my mom had been sick for about 7 years and had died from multiple sclerosis. even though I had prayed many times a day, every day, for God to heal, and she just got worse and worse and worse and died. Some of you guys know that kind of experience. It doesn't make sense. I had that going on. I had moved many, many times growing up and had to start over and make friends and then leave friends and make friends and leave friends. I had been engaged to be married and broke things off 8 weeks before the wedding date. Woo! And got all the deposit money back. Yeah! The Lord provides. I hope she doesn't watch this podcast. But all this pain had backed up in my life. And I brought this to my friend because it was affecting all my relationships. It was breaking me down. I was so lost. And he said to me this, Jesse, it is time to be a good steward of your pain. It is time to be a good steward of your pain. And this is a space where in some ways life is going great and is working out like you want it to. And in many ways, it's not quite working out like you'd hoped it would. That relationship didn't quite work. You didn't get in and do this. You didn't achieve this like you thought you would. For me, that looked like intentionally getting into some therapy, which I highly recommend. For me, that looked like being more intentional in my small group community that I had, really being more vulnerable and saying, look, I have not got it together. If you had any idea how the person next to you does not have it together, you would not feel so bad about the fact that you don't have it together. But it's time to be a good steward of your pain. It's time to own that stuff. Nobody's perfect. It's time to forgive those who have hurt us. Forgive ourselves for the dumb things we have done that have hurt ourselves. Because our healing becomes healing for others. Our wholeness becomes wholeness for others. And this is what we must bring into these spaces if we're going to inject life into our communities. This parallels what we find kind of at the end of this John 4 passage. Because this woman, eventually, after having this interaction with Jesus, discovering that he is the Messiah, then goes and tells everybody. And here is her testimony. Here is her testimony of freedom. She says this to her neighbors. He told me everything I ever did. What? Like, that's the stuff you're ashamed of. The stuff that you did, that's your shame. But because of this interaction with Jesus, this encounter, her shame has now become her release, has become her freedom, has become her story of victory that now infects the community that she lives in. In fact, it says that eventually they went in and said, we no longer believe just because of what you said. Now we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this man really is the Savior of the world. Our healing brings healing to others. So it's time to be a good steward of your pain. But there's a third and final key that I want to address here real quick. It's more in between the lines of this passage. And what's amazing is, again, the way that Jesus so respectfully interacts with this woman. He treats her as an equal. He kind of initiates the conversation, but she sort of takes over and starts going in all these different directions, but he follows her. He doesn't try to dominate. He doesn't try to take over. He just follows. He stays with her. He is present. He listens. And so what we see, this third key, is really humility. Humility, which is a hard thing to come by online sometimes, isn't it? I want to share my best pictures. I want to share my best pictures of the best trip. I want to share the most exciting details. I tend to overthink my status updates, if I'm honest. I really try to make it clever and interesting. It's not clever and interesting, but I try. Christine Rosen, who is an author and researcher, calls Facebook and stuff like it a culture of status. The more you participate, the more interesting your stuff is, the more your status goes up. And so, of course, it's an arena for wanting to be clever, wanting to get noticed. It's hard to be humble in that. What do I mean by humility? I just simply mean not thinking too highly of yourself. Okay, we get that. As followers of Jesus, we kind of have a tougher time with this other one, which is it's not thinking too lowly of yourself. It's not putting yourself down. Humility is actually just thinking rightly about yourself, of having a real clear sense of who you are. Again, one of the best gifts you could give to me and to this community around you is to know yourself. Get clear about who you really are, who God has made you to be. It's thinking rightly of ourselves. Well, how do we do that? I think it's as simple as we need accurate reflections. Have you ever tried to get ready, like kind of get yourself ready in the morning without a mirror? Kind of looks like I did, I know. But if you try it, it's kind of tough. You're just sort of hoping for the best. But if you've got a mirror there, you can kind of get a real clear sense, okay, this is what's going right this morning. This is all that's going wrong. Here's how I need to sort of overcompensate today to make up for this hair. That mirror. When Katie and I were first married, we had very little money. It's strange because we have even less money now, so I don't know how that worked out. But we bought a $3 full-length mirror from Target. $3. You guys ever been to a circus? Kind of this style? So if you're like on one side, you're like, dude, I just lost 10 pounds. I look hot. If you're on this side, I just gained 25. I'm bummed. A $3 mirror is not going to give you a very accurate reflection. Likewise, we have people in our lives, even though they care for us so much, good friends, family, other kinds of authority figures, they are not going to be perfect mirrors reflecting back to us exactly what we need to see. Jesus, of course, is that only clear mirror, and it's only as we stare at him, that we start to get a sense of who we actually are. And we must be clear about who we actually are. Because if we could be clear about who we are, we would not need to posture. We would not feel the need to prove ourselves to anyone. We wouldn't downplay our unique gifts and abilities. We would let ourselves shine. We would be at ease in our own skin. At ease in our own skin, which I've had for about 30 seconds in my entire life, I feel like. Intentionality, authenticity, humility. These are some steps we can use, some ways we can think about engaging with each other around this material this week. And I'm excited that you guys are doing that. And I hope this information has been helpful to you, but I got to be honest and say that I wonder if more information is what you need. You guys get a lot of information. You're going to learn stuff today. Your brains are already full. This is good info, but what we need, I believe, and what will revolutionize, utterly revolutionize social networking, social media, and community as we know it, is actually an encounter like this woman had with Jesus. That in her going, in her shame, in her routine, she ran into the God of the universe who met her and saw her and renamed her, gave her a new name, new purpose, new identity. And this is not a come to Jesus moment. Although if you want to do that, that's sweet. I want to just take a few moments to pray for you. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, not to be all kind of churchy and whatnot, but simply to have a space of your own where you are a bit free from distractions. Because the reason this woman's life is changed, and in turn why her community is changed, is because she runs into the God of the universe. So God has given us imagination to kind of dream up new things. He's also given us imagination to take hold of truths that he wants to show us. And so I'm going to ask you to use your imagination just now. I literally believe that God is in this room. I literally believe that Jesus is standing next to you. And I want you to kind of picture that and picture his hand kind of on your head. If that freaks you out, don't worry about it. Jesus, you are here with us. And we long for community. We know we were made for community. We do our best. We screw it up sometimes. But Jesus, without a clear understanding of how you see us, we will never be able to really bring life to this community. We will never be able to enjoy and receive it. So Holy Spirit, I ask in this place, even in this gym, even on this particular morning, even though we've all heard lots of talks and heard lots of things about you, would you speak to us just now in this quiet? As we inhale and exhale, breathe new life into us. Renew our understanding of your love for us. Give us clarity about ourselves. Give us clarity about the most life-giving ways we can interact with each other. Oh, Jesus, may it be so. We love you, and we say thanks so much for being the God who is in community and invited us into community and can show us everything that we need in order to do it well. We love you and say thanks. Amen.